When I go to a meeting, I've done the pre-reads, and you get 100% of my attention. 100%. None of this nodding off, none of this reading my mail. If you have an iPad in front of me and it looks like you're reading your email or getting notifications, I tell you to close the damn thing. It's disrespectful.
For the past 2 decades, Jamie Dimon has led JPMorgan Chase as its CEO during periods of rapid change and even crisis. Through it, Dimon has built the largest U.S. bank and emerged as the smartest voice on the U.S. and global economies.
If we are not the preeminent military and the preeminent economy in 40 years, we will not be the reserve currency.
His opinion and counsel are sought after by leaders across all sectors, from tariff impact to return to office mandates to best management practices. Dimon, who has led effectively even through instability and hardship, including 2 major personal health episodes, says his goal now is to live deliberately, as many wonder what succession will look like at his bank.
The economy is weakening.
As part of that, he has 3 major priorities: his family, his country, and what he views as his personal contribution to the world. I sat down with Dimon to pick his brain on all of it and to bring you back the best advice to help you navigate your own lives and jobs. So, Jamie, you were in New York this morning giving great earnings reports, actually, and now you're here. It's the life of the CEO to be on the road. We appreciate your time with us. I just wanted to open with an economic snapshot from your vantage point. What's happening in the economy? What's happening in the global economy? What are the main signals you're looking at?
So first of all, welcome everybody. Thrilled to be here. I have a little laryngitis. I apologize for that. Look, the global economy is like inscrutable. So I'm going to tell you, but I want to point out, whenever you talk about it, we always say we're worried about this or uncertain about that. You can open the newspaper of any month, of any year, of anything. It's always that way. Always. What you have to do is compare it to an average, and I do think an average is more complicated. It's more complicated because of trade and tariffs. It's more complicated with huge global deficits. The inflation is not going away. The geopolitical situation, the remilitarization of the world. These are fairly serious things. Interest rates, and I think the chance of surprise are pretty high. Underneath that, if you look at America, the consumer's doing fine. Unemployment's good. Wages not going up so much. Labor's gotten a little bit weaker. Wholesale credit's been good, but I suspect that's, we borrowed and spent $10 trillion over the last 6 years. Of course, that's going to drive corporate profits and corporate credit, so that may weaken. The whole world is a deficit issue. And so I'm kind of in the cautious category, and also made cautious by the fact that asset prices are high, in some form of bubble territory, but that doesn't mean they can't go up 20% more. Credit spreads are historical lows. So it looks like the world is pricing in, I'm going to call it a continued soft landing. And, if you looked at next year, and I hate forecasting, what's the odds of a recession? Well, in any one year, it's 20 or 30%. So, I think the market's pricing in 10. I'd say 20 or 30% is probably more accurate. The chance of not being surprised by something next year. And then you look at factors like tariffs. I look at, it's just a straw on the camel's back. It's not the one thing that's going to break the camel's back. It's always a confluence of factors that do that, and it's very hard. Maybe AI will one day figure it out, but it's very hard for human beings, to consistently forecast real inflection points in the economy.
What are some of the longer-term cycles that you're keeping an eye on that may not be reflected as much in the numbers today, but you're a little bit worried about?
That's a very important point. I always do future back. People look at, the data today, unemployment today. Well, unemployment was good. Markets were good in 71, and then they crashed. That was true in 80, and then they crashed. That was true in 87, and there was a crash. That was true in 1990, and it got down. So you can't look at current data. You've got to anticipate data. So here's some anticipatory data. Deficits are not going away, and that will bite one day. I don't know when. Inflation, what I see is healthcare prices going up 10%, food prices are not going down, immigration policies are inflationary, the remilitarization of the world is inflationary, the restructuring of trade is inflationary, the capital needs from AI and infrastructure is large, growing, and probably inflationary in the short run. So that's why I look at the risk is that rates go up, inflation goes up, and the Fed can't cuts rates anymore, maybe has to reverse course. And when I look at risk, I just put that on the table among all the possibilities of outcomes, and we are prepared for that more than most. In fact, if you look at all things being equal make more money if interest rates go up. On the other hand, if interest rates go up because of inflation and there's stagflation, we will do much worse on credit, volumes, and a whole bunch of stuff I can't predict.
Can I play a game with you?
What?
Can I play a game?
Sure.
Can we play overvalued, undervalued?
Yeah, you could try.
Okay.
I
Gold.
always tell the press you can ask whatever you want, and I say whatever I want.
We're going to play a game. It's time to play a game. So, gold. Overvalued or undervalued?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a gold buyer. It costs 4% to own it. It could easily go to 5,000 or 10,000 in environments like this. This is one of the few times in my life I said it's semi-rational to have some in your portfolio. But asset prices are kind of high, so I'm not. Yeah, in the back of my mind, that cuts across almost everything at this point.
Bitcoin.
My blockchain is real. Stable coins may have a real use. We have the JPMorgan coin. Tokens will be real. Programmable money, all that'll be real. I'm not going to say that about Bitcoin because then that's all I'm going to read about in the headlines. The next, and then I get death threats and shit like that. So that stuff like.
So it's not a pet rock, but maybe a pet rock, TBD. But the underlying technology, you think? Is
yeah, but I've always said that blockchain is a technology that we've all been yapping about for 12 years, and it's not fully deployed. Because it's hard to deploy blockchain that we all agree on permissions and rules. And I do, we do use it. We use it intraday repo. I think it's going to replace certain systems we all use that are clunky or late or not 24/7. Those are all legitimate complaints. And blockchain may be one of the things that fixes that. Other technologies can fix it too, by the way. It's not the only thing that can fix it. And sometimes it's a solution looking for a problem. We already move money real-time payments. Most of it moves digitally in effect. It runs through AML, KYC, risk systems when it happens. You can't just replace all that with a blockchain and think you're doing what regulators and governments want you to do. So it's a little more complicated than just it's going to replace everything.
Next, NVIDIA.
I can't comment on them, but there's some of these names that I just don't want to give specific stuff. Unbelievable company. AI itself is real. I know we're going to talk about AI a little bit later, so I'll reserve that for that.
Okay, so then what about OpenAI? That's the last one.
Well, again, are we going to talk about AI in general? Or you want to do it now?
That's next.
First of all, I think you should all use it. To stop debating open, closed, little models, big. It's going to be all that. It's going to be faster. It's going to get cheaper. You have specialized models. We have 2,000 people doing it. We've been doing it since 2012. We have hundreds of use cases. We can identify benefits of like $2 billion, maybe 2.5. I was told today. Either cost saves or revenue enhancements. And it's just part of how we run the business today. Just like big math was that before, and is making huge improvements in certain things. Other things are hard to measure. Like Gen AI, we have almost 150,000 people using it a week on internal documents for report writing, for reviewing hundreds of thousands of legal documents, for summarizing things. It's just hard to tell the productivity. I do think it's real. I think in total AI is real. Just like if you go back to 1996, in total the internet was real. There were a lot of people in there. You could look at the whole thing like it was a bubble. Remember, it crashed at one point, but out of that came Google, YouTube, Meta. So I think in total it'll pay off. It's hard to know exactly which ones will, and they won't be the ones you necessarily predict today. There may be some attributes where winner takes all. That may not be true. I mean, we'll see over time how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's completely true. The hype is a real tech that is extremely transformative.
Extremely good, yeah.
And you will get the next
power. It's high capital usage, unlike the internet. So it's got different dynamics. The power may not be there in some cases. Bad guys are going to use it, but bad guys use the internet on social media. They used airplanes for bad things. And so I do think there should be proper, thoughtful regulations and guardrails to protect the public. It will eliminate jobs. I think people should stop sticking their head in the sand. So did tractors, and so did cars, and now if it happens too fast, we, society, government, and businesses should figure out how we can save jobs, save people, retrain, income assist, early retirement or something. So you can't just take all these people and throw them on the street where the next job is, making $30,000 a year when they're making $150,000. That you'll have a revolution. So we should be thoughtful about that. But in the meantime, you should get good at using it and deploy it, and we'll figure it out.
So there's so much in there that I could dig into each of it, and so I'm going to try and tack a little bit at a time. One is your investment in AI as a company. There's been this well-cited MIT study that so many of these early corporate pilot programs of AI have just been giant money pits, and they haven't been that effective in generating real returns for companies. I know you just came out with a report that said you guys have invested about $2 billion in. You're getting about $2 billion back. It sounds like break-even point finally.
Yeah, and I
for
was
AI.
wrong about the $2 billion cost. It's considerably less than that. I think MIT.
You have spent less.
I think MIT was talking about generative AI, not about AI. So, most of the things that when we apply AI to AML, KYC, or risk or fraud, very specific things, or errors, or customer service, it works. Reconciliations, you apply it, and then sometimes, by it's just improving your procedures. It's not even really AI. It's just part of the process improvement. You go in, and all of a sudden, your head count's down 40%, and your time to get something done is not 12 days. It's 12 hours or 12 minutes. So it absolutely works. You can overcount, the cost saves or the revenues. It works for fraud. We know our fraud costs are coming down. Most people's are going up. It works we spend $10 billion a year in marketing. And we know it's going to work on marketing. I mean, marketing by its nature is very inefficient. Put the stuff on the wall and see what happens. And they'll be able to measure multiple different things. So, and it can measure productivity. It reduces coding times for those who use it by 30%. That's all real. Generative AI is the other category where that's where you're really using generative AI to read documents. So you might have used it to figure out some of these questions here. It's hard to tell. Like,
Never.
What do you say? What?
Never.
Yeah, but you can say, well, it saved me 2
little.
hours. What's that worth? Did you just spend 2 hours doing something else? So we don't really know. And I think it's a mistake to try to calculate everything positive. We spend a lot of money getting data into the proper format so it can be used by AI. We're just doing it. We're not measuring how much it costs. We're just going to get it in proper database, et cetera. So, but it is completely real. And I think MIT is either wrong or it's just generative AI. I think it was just generative AI.
Interesting. So did you have any big corporate failures, though, as you were figuring out how to make more efficiencies with AI? Any learnings along the way?
We did something different where we it's not in tech, even though them and tech are like deep partners in everything they do. And tech does a lot of the heavy lifting, but the AI experts, think of the data CEOs and the data people are in this area. So, and then we have a mirror inside every company, credit card, consumer, trading. And I think it really works. It's part of it's in your mind. How do you deploy it? I can't tell you use AI. You have to figure out how you're going to use it, sit down and think about it, call friends at other companies. So most of them actually work, but I say some are maybe disappointing. There's no example we spent $400 million and it was a complete waste of money. There's none of that. And even if it was part of just the learnings of getting something done.
So you're recommending to a lot of companies, you think it's time to be investing in it?
Absolutely.
Time to go.
You should be using it. It should be, when we meet as for business reviews, every business review at a detailed level, what are you doing in technology? What are you doing in AI? What are the projects? How are you improving it? We're sending people to a master class so the management team say, my God, I didn't know it could do that for me. I didn't know it could read 100,000 documents. I didn't know it can correlate this database with that database and tell me patterns that I can't possibly see, which is how we're picking up a lot of fraud. It's pattern recognition, the part of some of the AI machines that human beings can't pick up. So, yeah, use it. Get good at it. Make it part of your tool set, your weapon set, and you'll learn. It'll get better all the time. Your management will get better, and you should do it. In any business.
And did you say you're sending your executives and your team to a master class in AI? Is that how are you training your teams in it?
We had a request from our own people. So I said we have 150,000 people using large language models on inside data. And remember, the inside data, private data, is huge, and it's not in the web. And therefore, all the data is being used right. That's not completely true. And we use data both inside and outside. But a lot of people saying, I want to learn. I want to learn how to use it. How do you think about it? When I sit down as a management team, so our HR people did a great job. They formed a master class. Some was at headquarters. I think some was MIT. Some were inside people. Some were outside people. We just had the first one, and I haven't gotten a report back. I always tell people to do something like that. People say, this is great. This is wonderful. I want to know if 6 months later they say it was useful. And so we're going to find out. But I'm sure it had some benefit.
Awesome. Last question on AI. So it's the CapEx spending on it, especially from tech companies, is tremendous. AI companies, I read a stat, have accounted for 80% of gains of U.S. stocks in 2025, and companies investing hundreds of billions in AI accounts for an estimated 40% of U.S. GDP growth this year. Does that concern you as you look at the markets? What kind of a bubble are we talking about? And also the secular nature of the investments going into these AI companies, AMD into OpenAI, back into the chips, things like that.
It's 40% of the increase in GDP, which I forgot was 2.5%. So it was a big increase in CapEx. And remember that CapEx is roads and cement and steel and servers and connectors. It's a million different things going on. Now, I wouldn't say I'm concerned. And like I said, you can't look at AI as a bubble, though some of these things may be in the bubble. In total, it will probably pay off. Some of those projects won't get done the way they were announced. Some of them won't get the power they need. And when you look at how they're done, I call it project finance. If JPMorgan's leasing a building from you, that's a pretty good credit. If you are relying on a company that doesn't have revenues to pay you for your lease, that's not the same thing. Or, who's responsible for finishing the building? Is there insurance on it? What if the machines don't work? What if the chips fail? Who's taking all these risks? And so you got to go literally project by project. And even on that investment scheme, it's not abnormal to have vendor finance, which is what you seal about buy part of your company. You get the cash, I'll finance your purchase. You got to go one by one to say, is it pushing the bubble, or is it real? Is it, they're really going to develop stuff that'll have productive capability to pay off on the investment? Like I said, in total, I think they probably will, but one by one, I don't know.
So I want to jump ahead to just a little bit of a near-term look at the market to 2026. The Trump administration has done a lot this year. The tariffs. First off, the first thing I want to actually ask you is, on April 2nd, when the Liberation Day tariffs dropped, what was your day like? Tell me that 24-hour day in the life of Jamie Dimon.
I do remember it. I remember the market going down considerably, and then for a couple of days after, that number caught people by surprise. And I think appropriately the administration backed off of it and assigned people to go country by country to come up with these agreements in principle, which are agreements in principle. And the market came way, I've got 15% or something like that, and then mostly recovered once it seemed more rational. And I think you've seen that pattern exhibit itself. And that's how they negotiate. Out here, and we'll move here, see how you're moving, what works, what doesn't work. And in some ways, it's good. It's wrong for people to say it's not good. To respond to legitimate complaints about what you're doing is a good thing to do, and to make adjustments is appropriate, which they've said they're going to do in India. They've said they're going to do in China. The market went down 1,000 points. When the minor trade war happened, and so. That's the right thing to do, but they're still out there. These are our allies and friends, and we should finish these things and put them in place. I think they're getting better at it. They're very complicated. I'm not sure when they started, they completely are complicated. In fact, someone from the government told me that you need hundreds of people to negotiate one deal. I think the whole trade department has 450. And there were 100 of these. So, it takes a little bit of time to work through.
I assume you're
and the really important thing to me, by the way, we need to keep the Western world together economically. And while there are legitimate trade complaints, both about national security, we made some failures, and unfair trade, I hope at the end of the day that we are embracing our allies and our non-allies. India is not an ally of ours, but I think we should embrace them. They're a natural ally. All we have to do is reach out our hand. Trade is part of that. But I've also been told that hopefully that'll be resolved soon too.
Well, that gets into the bigger geopolitical reordering that's happening around these tariffs. And yes, they've come down from that April 2nd day, for the most part, pretty much everywhere. But it is creating ripple effects. Yes, we're getting some nice revenue back into the country, but also other countries are turning to each other for help. And if you look at China, I wonder, do you think we've overplayed our hand there a little bit? They corner the market on rare earth. They have turned to the rest of the world to make up some of the business lost from the U.S. in these trade talks. So what's happening there?
I think it's very complicated. This is a multiplayer, multi-year game. And so initial responses, you're absolutely right. negotiating a settlement here does not mean you don't do things going forward. I think you have seen people do that. And there are layers of these things where you can move some business over here, but you can't move it all. You can avoid some tariffs over there. It's complicated. And with China, it's the most complicated. They're the biggest trading partner with everyone in the world. In the rare earths, yeah, they've kind of cornered it, but the rare earths everywhere. They're not rare. This is the processing, mining, and dirty. We basically outsource dirty stuff to other countries is what this was, and we should be able to fix that. So, but they've also, when they do something like that, they're also telling the world they're willing to do something like that. And so, this goes a little bit of both ways. I would be in favor of deep engagement with China, where there are legitimate issues, and there are some about how they subsidize industries, and they should be very specific. And then anything about national security to me has got nothing to do with China. It's got to do with we need to make sure that things are done here or in friendly places with secure supply chains that we need for national security, our defense, and our safety. And that's a whole different issue that it should be unilateral. That's not a negotiation.
So stepping back into the strategy of what the Trump administration seems to be doing in some ways is they're almost operating the American government like it's a business in need of a turnaround. We have this ballooning deficit, and some things have been helpful in reducing that. Some things are not, like the one big beautiful bill. But it seems like if you listen to Howard Lutnick speaking, he's talking about things like, well, revenue is coming in from tariffs, and why are we giving handouts to like Harvard grants and to Intel? We should be taking equity and getting upside potential for that. That's sort of how a venture capitalist would think, and that's not been done before in our government. Is this a good idea or not?
We had a lot in there.
Yes. Every topic.
I think that government should be pro-business and pro-growth, and I think that's very good. I think the tariffs, we think it's going to collect at a run rate of about $400 billion a year, somewhat offset by the big, beautiful bill that will be more stimulus, and that a lot of that's front-ended. So, and I think deregulation, I should say smart regulation is a good idea. And everyone knows it is crippling to people. It's redundant, it slows people down, you can't move, it's hard to get licenses, it's hard to get permitting, it affects affordable housing. Of course they're right to be looking at that. And then of course, when you say business, government isn't business, but they should have the same, and I've been right about this for years, you give me your money for schools or whatever I do, I owe you, you gave me this, we said we'd do this, here's the outcome. Here's the cost per person. Here's how many people we covered. Here's how many people got jobs. Here's how many people, and they don't do that. So, to apply certain disciplines to government, absolutely. And until we do it, I would say, I'm going to guess, there's not one person in this room, even the most liberal Democrat in the room, who would say the government is well run and efficient. Okay, and they owe you that. And it is part of the reason we have a little bit of this. People think Washington is a swamp because it sucks up money. It's the great sucking sound. Like, how many of you think if we gave Washington another $1 trillion that you will be better off? That poor people would be better off? That school, well, maybe there are few people believe that, but you haven't spent much time in what goes on in this town, and so and how money goes to special interest groups and all these various things. So they already collect 20% of everyone's profits. So, they already have, they're kind of an owner of our companies, you look at it. I think they have to be very careful about individual deals with individual logic. And I don't know all the deals, so I don't know all the things that took place. We know some of these companies were involved in some, so I can't answer specific questions. But you got to be very careful about why, what, when, where. What kind of precedent does this set? Is it national security? Is it fairness? I thought they did a very good deal with MP Materials. We were the banker on that, but they signed a long-term contract, which these companies need to survive. They bought a piece of the company. They probably tripled their money already. I think that is a reasonable thing to do, but it's national security. It's not, and Intel's national security, because I do think advanced chips are, but whether that was the way to do it, I'd have to leave that to people who know exactly what was in the deal. And remember, whatever you think of it, if Democrats do it, that terrifies me. That's those golden shares owned by Democrats, they'll be dictating to us every social value system they believe, and that'll be that. We'll look like Europe in 10 years.
So last political one. There's a New York City mayor race happening. What are your thoughts on Mamdani probably becoming the mayor?
Oh, I have to deal with the world I got. Not the world I want. And if he becomes mayor, so be it. What does he really think? He was part of that socialist democratic thing, which literally is more Marxist than socialist if you read it. But I don't know what he believes of that, so I don't want to assign all that to him. He's talking to a lot of people. He's convinced a lot of people he's willing to change. He wants to learn. I don't know if that's right. Some people are what they are. They're not going to change, and the rest of that's just typical deception. Or he may change. The other thing, which I would tell him if you're right here, I've seen lots of mayors, and a lot of these folks have never run something. And all of a sudden, they are running a huge bureaucracy. Police, sanitation, fire, schools, and potholes, crime. And that's what the people want. A good mayor gets in that job. They realize, I got to deliver those things. Those things are not Democrat or Republican. And they should be measured and tracked. You have meetings and good people. And some mayors and governors get in the job, never managed, and they grow into it. They get good people, they're organized, they get other people to be organized, and some, they're a complete mess for the whole time they're there. Running out, having 84 different advisors, responding to the last person in the room, and all that kind of stuff, and we don't know. And I would hope for the best in this case, and New York will survive. We survived at de Blasio.
New York is resilient, it is true.
But it is odd, to have the bastion of American capitalism, with a socialist getting that job.
Yeah. Well, what does that say about capitalism and what needs to change?
I'll tell you one of the things it says. Well, no, capitalism has a lot to fix. I'm not like everything works, free market. We've never had free markets like totally free. You need properly regulated, systems and disclosures, and a lot of those regulations do a good job. That doesn't mean they didn't overdo some of them. But take New York City, and this is wrong, what I'm about to say. JPMorgan, me personally, cannot get involved in local politics because we have pay-to-play rules, and there are multiple rules, by the way, but they're SEC rules. If we do business with the government, which of course we do, but who could get involved? Every union, lawyers, real estate, everybody. They took the main players in New York off the field. And I've asked my general counsel, who's superb, by the way, and she's brilliant. I ask her all the time, doesn't that violate my First Amendment rights? And she says, yes, it does, but, and it's wrong. And there's something wrong with that. There's somehow, I can't speak up and I can't fight for what I believe in New York City because we do business with the government, which the lawyers do, the real estate do, the unions do. There's something wrong with our system that's how we fight these political battles. And gerrymandering, which, maybe everyone uses it, you got to do it, the other guy's doing it. It's a sick system. And it's why we all question government, and if you're going to make it a fight, make it a fair fight.
All right, you want to switch topics? I'll let you off.
But by the way, if he becomes mayor, I will call him and offer my help. Doesn't mean I'll agree with him. It may be that he asks for help in a way I refuse to do it. But maybe he's actually looking for help in things we can do, and we can help the kids in our schools, the crime in the streets, or something like that, or capital. We will help him. I am a patriot. I help governors, mayors, presidents. We help people around the world. A lot of you think, how can you possibly do business in that country? We're there for the country and the people of the country, not necessarily the prime minister or the president. And we're there forever. We're not there for, one thing. So I look a little bit at this more like real politic. Get involved and grow up. That's the world we got.
Love it. That is great leadership. Thank you. I think we need more of that. Speaking of leadership, you have been at the helm of JPMorgan for quite a long time, about 2 decades, and that far exceeds the amount of time that most CEOs get to stay in the job. 7 years, I think, is the average for a man running a Fortune 500, and about 5 for a woman running a Fortune 500. What's the secret to longevity in the role, other than obviously performing incredibly well as you have?
Well, first of all, I love what I do, so I enjoy it, and I like our people, and and I need my rest. I may get tired. Sometimes I always tell people management is a lot of fun except for 2 things.
People?
Customers and employees. But I do enjoy it. I find it, and it's got purpose for me. I make our cities a better place, our clients a better place. We create opportunities for employees. We do great philanthropic work. We bank the cities, schools, states, hospitals. We're the biggest small business lender. We operate in 100 countries. I've met more presidents and prime ministers. That's all fascinating. But my point is, you got to like it. you gotta do the job. I mean, you can't retire in place. You don't have Tom Brady go out in the field and say, I've been doing this a long time. I'm kind of tired, so I'm going to sit out this game. No, those guys, it's every practice they give it their all. And that's kind of how I am every day, every meeting. I go to a lot. I'm going to tell you this as a little management lesson. When I go to a meeting, I've done the pre-reads, and you get 100% of my attention. 100%. None of this nodding off, none of this reading my mail. If you have an iPad in front of me and it looks like you're reading your email or getting notifications, I tell you to close the damn thing. It's disrespectful. And so when I can't do that, I should move on. And so some of these CEOs, if you look at it, some weren't good. It took a while for the board to figure it out, or it took an activist to figure it out. Some were good and didn't like the job. I mean, I know people have said, I don't want to do this anymore. It is a burden to bear for many. And so and work hard, Oh, the other thing, which I think is really important, it's there's a humility about learning. I mean, every day. I mean, if I need to know something, I have to call you up to find out. I'm not an expert in everything that takes place in the company. And so, sometimes people write about, he's a micromanager.
He does call.
Maybe more than some other people, but always learning, things are always changing. I'm always worried, and if you get arrogant, and I did a YouTube masterclass on this, if you get arrogant, complacency, lack of curiosity, you'll kill the company. And that's the petri dish for politics, which is stasis and death. And I really do mean that. If you look at, matter of fact, you should write an article.
Tell me.
Years ago, Fortune did this thing about, I think they went back to 1910. So you had the Fortune 500. Whenever you started keeping that, how many people fell out over time? You did it recently with just the top 10 or something like that. The churn is enormous. And the failures are very high. And if you look at the failures, and a lot of them failed, they were sold out. They sold out because they were failing, not because they were leaders sometimes. Now think of Nokia's handset, BlackBerry, digital equipment, Sears, AMP. And it's a lesson in these companies. The root cause was arrogance, complacency, denial, politics, all that stuff. Instead of analyzing your business and saying, here's what we're good at. So even when I do anything, it's the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm not interested in you spinning me, and I don't spin my shareholders. You've never heard me on an analyst call spin, we're great at this. I'm more like, we shouldn't have done that. We failed to do this. We failed to build Stripe. We could have. I'm not embarrassed about it. It's just a fact, and I think people should acknowledge it in my own company so that we don't miss the next one maybe. And we're going to miss some. You can't, we hit a home run every time you're at bat, but those are the basics. Keep working, stay humble, work hard. I talk about road trips. People say, you're going to show the flag. I don't do road trips to show the flag.
Yeah, you go to every office all around.
I go around the world by plane, but we take a bus trip every year in jeans and polo shirts. We see branches and small business and call centers. I'm with my management team. We've had some press on the thing, watching us in action. On the bus, we have tellers and loan officers, and we give them beer and immunity.
Beer and immunity.
Tell us what's going on.
Great management tip.
And then we fix it.
Yeah.
If you went to I can go to any assistant and any teller right now, have a one-on-one conversation. I'll walk away with 3 notes of things we got to fix. And I want my management team to do it. So it's not about me doing it. I also get to watch them if they're able to do it. Some aren't. They just don't like being lectured to by subordinates about what they're doing wrong. And the Army has this great thing called the after action report, where even when they're just practicing, what happened, how did it happen, and it's not officers telling enlisted, it's the enlisted and the officers talking together. You gave me an order to go down this rope to do 10 a.m., but the stuff wasn't in place when I got there, and so it's that open conversation that makes you a better company.
Well, Jamie, I promised the people they could have their questions, so let's turn to the audience for questions. I think right here in the front, we've got Tammy and Betsabe.
Okay, so first of all, your new building is extraordinary.
Yes, that was on the list.
I can't believe we didn't ask about it, but that's not my question. So I'm Tammy Rosen from Pagaya Technologies. So my question is this. The country really wants to be the winner at AI, right? We want to be able to win this race. But how can we do that when our immigration policies are now going to constrict us from getting the best talent, and our schools are not going to be able to take in those foreign students? And if you look at Silicon Valley, more than a majority of those founders are immigrants. So how can you, JPMorgan, your role, kind of think about what we do in this space? Because it's a real problem if you don't have the best talent.
Yeah, so I agree with you. We are the bright city on the hill that still attracts the best and the brightest. We should do that. I was with the president once where he said, after I get border control, which he has, it's amazing how quickly, we got to give him credit for that. But he said I would stamp a green card onto everyone who had a degree or an advanced degree here. I still believe that. And a path to citizenship for DACA. It's DACA stays, a path to citizenship, seasonal. I hope one day we get to real immigration reform. If you're talking about H-1Bs, you know how many H-1B visas there are in the country today? 600,000. And 160 million people work. So I find it hard to believe that is going to change whether we win an AI or not. So I do think, and there were legitimate complaints about H-1Bs. I always look at all the details when these things come up about, some people using it just have cheaper staff to make more profit on consulting things. And some people will pay the price to bring in the talent they need. So I think people will sort it out somehow. It won't be devastating. And then the other one you mentioned is foreign students. So we're in favor of foreign students. I think they should allow that. I think the university said it. They pay full boat for the most part, and they still here. It's just there's talk in Congress about lessening the amount of Chinese foreign students or something like that. I don't know what's going to happen there.
Okay. Lots of hands.
Hi, Betsabe Herman, Head of Research at Philips. I have a European question. You have warned that Europe is losing its competitive edge, and I'm just wondering what advice do you have for European-based companies and how could they gain back some of that competitive edge back?
Yeah, so I love Europe, and I think the goal of our policy should be, both militarily, I think there are legitimate complaints about NATO, but I think to make NATO and the allies stronger. And so that should be goal. And goal two should be the economic side, which, writ large, is investments, it's how we treat each other, it's tariffs, it's other trade issues, it's strategic communication. Do we tell people why these systems work better than those systems, et cetera? Europe does a lot of things well, so there's not a total criticism. Its GDP per person has gone from 90% of America to like 65%. And that is on the road to 60%, 55%. And at one point, that's not quite sustainable. And so my view, and the Draghi wrote a report, there are 300 recommendations there. I would take all of them. That is how you fix it. And so maybe more efficient and effective social nets. Some countries have very good ones. They're costly, but they work really well. Other ones have ones that don't work really well. There's bad policies, all over the place around hiring and training, and you have the same regulations. You need a common market. Like one of the big advantages for JPMorgan Chase, we have a huge home market, and there they have fragmented markets. And it's not just banking. It's true for telecom. It's true for some of your equipment you make. It's true so to create a real common market. It was a huge accomplishment to have the European Union. They went about halfway there, and they kind of stopped. And then people got very upset, somewhat legitimately, because Brussels was this bureaucratic power that was imposing upon countries certain things they didn't like, i.e., which is led to Brexit. I don't think it was a good thing to do, but we got to recognize that. What does the European Union do, and what's left to the states? And they shouldn't be lecturing you about all your different policies in every different country. So, capital markets union, pro-business, pro-growth, permitting regulation, deregulation. Not worse regulation, smart regulation that reduces the extraordinary burden that has there and drive innovation. They have, by the way, one piece of good news, they recognize it. So I look at Macron, Merz, Starmer, Maloney, they all know it. They're all talking about it. I think they all mean it. They're talking to each other, both about strengthening NATO and about strengthening the economy. It's going to be hard. And I think we all need to put some elbow grease into why and we also have to tell people, pro-growth policies, they may be good for big business and business. They are very good for the citizens of our country. And we've missed teaching people that lesson. And then we should also acknowledge, like in the United States of America, the bottom 20% have been left behind. Their incomes, haven't gone up for 25 years. They're dying 7 years younger. Their schools suck. They go back to crime-ridden neighborhoods, and then they get lectured to by the elite. And when they see some of the things government does, like EV credits, which may make you all feel good, they don't benefit from EV credits. Defunding the police hurt them. Their schools aren't good. So most of you, your kids go to schools, you don't even worry about it. You don't worry when you go home. And we did that. That was Democratic and Republican policies for the last 30 or 40 years did not have the outcomes we wanted. And we should recognize that and then ask why. I always remind myself, if you don't recognize a problem, you cannot fix it. So Europe and America, it's a similar list. I've written about it. And we're going to get more involved in lobbying for good policy for Europe because I think it's that important to the Western world.
In the red chair.
Thank you very much. Deborah DeSanzo, Best Buy. So another thing we need to be successful in AI is data centers that take clean water and electricity. Water and electricity run by the city and states that don't have capital. What can be done?
The markets are going to fix that. People are building plants in different places. They're finding ways to reduce water need. A lot of these plants, they're building their own gas plants right there. They're drilling right there, and they're putting these big data centers right next to that gas plant, which gives continuous energy. Some of these fixes will take place. There will be this, I don't know if it's a conflict, that there will be that, what is for consumer power? What's for wholesale power of these data centers? Is it raising the price? There'll be a lot of issues like that, which I hope are quickly sorted through so we can build some of these data centers and also serve our clients. Gas prices are down, electricity prices are up, and they're going to continue going up. And one of the ways to fix it is to fix permitting. That is making it much harder, much costlier for almost all these projects being built. That's true for solar and wind. And they look at these things. It takes so long to get, when you put in $1 billion in the ground, if the payoff is in 10 years and not 4, how do you feel? And it's also true for pipelines that bring clean gas into New York. For wires that bring clean energy from Canada into Massachusetts. Can't get built because Maine and New Hampshire said you can't put the power lines there. And we're crippling ourselves. I can give you a million examples and it's kind of sad.
Over here.
Hi, Heather White, Chief Legal Officer, Genpact. I have more of a comment than a question because I don't think you're going to answer what I want to ask. But I listened to you on Acquired recently. You did a podcast. That was great. I think there's a lot of women in this room who would love you to run for office.
Well, at 69, you'd be young.
Yeah. I'm aging nicely into that job, so I think I'm a little too young for the big one.
Maybe you could answer in a yes or no. Do you foresee running at some point in your life?
I do not. And I love what I do. And so I'd have to give up something I do for something which would be, at the best, quixotic. Okay? And I think from this perch, I do everything I can to help my country. We just announced that Strategic Resiliency Initiative, $1.5 trillion. We help veterans. We reach out to all LMI, lower income communities. We've hired 15,000 vets. We help schools, cities, states, Detroit. We get involved in public policy in Europe and parts of Asia. We get involved. I'm going to meet the development finance banks while I'm here. The IMF is this week. So we do all of those things to make it a better world. And I think that's the best I can do. And it makes me feel very good doing just that.
Well, Jamie, it has been a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Wait, you didn't ask me about journalism.
Well, are you going to buy Fortune at some point,
right,
too? That's
so
what's on the list, right?
I wanted to buy Fortune, and my board wouldn't let me, just so you know. And they were right. And plus, it might have tainted. I would never got involved in editorial stuff. It is absolutely critical. One of the things I'm doing tonight is I have salon dinners with press all the time now, just to talk about these issues. So they know they can ask. We're open. We get other CEOs to do it, to educate them, because they educate the influencers. Those influencers are senators, congressmen, staff, governors, mayors, and over time it works. And I think it could lead to better public policy. It's got to be done the right way, but it's journalism that does that. They educate the world, and they should. Sometimes they're too. I think some of it are so biased it's hard to listen to them anymore. But I always say, we keep on doing it. Put elbow grease in it, and I would, if I bought Fortune, I would spend a lot more money on the reporter side. The best reports, I think, detailed things and strategies, successful women, failures, countries, things that work and things that don't work, and more of that. I love deep content. I mean, there's nothing like it. I read a tremendous amount every day, and you're always looking for those deep insights, which usually come from what you read. I read 5 papers in the morning. I read things like Grant's Industry Observer, The Economist is the best. Of course, I read Fortune, Gloom, Doom, and Boom Report. A lot of eclectic stuff, and that anything says me that's how the world is going to stay smart.
It's so important. We're the fourth estate, that we uphold democracy. So I appreciate that you understand that and that you support it. Jamie, thank you so much for your insights and your time.
Folks, thank you.